Welcome to Literal BS Freedom Seekers, and today we'll talk about revealing the first, your freedom's core. I'm Rob, and we're embarking on a journey to understand one of the most powerful and often debated cornerstones of American democracy, the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. So let's get started. In an era overflowing with data, viewpoints, and rapid transformation, understanding the core freedoms that strengthen us as individuals has never been more vital. The First Amendment isn't merely an ancient text gathering dust. It's a dynamic, evolving foundation built on the principle that a democratic society flourishes through honest conversation, varied perspectives, and the courage to question established norms. We'll peel back the layers of this foundational amendment, exploring its 5 distinct clauses: freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, the right to peaceably assemble, and the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. We'll look at why these rights were so important to the founders, how they've been interpreted over the centuries, and their profound impact on our lives today. So, settle in, because this is going to be an illuminating episode for some. To truly appreciate the First Amendment, we need to rewind to the late 18th century. Imagine a world where governments often dictated religious practices, suppressed dissenting voices, and controlled the flow of information. The American colonists, having experienced these very restrictions under British rule, were determined to build a different kind of nation. When the Constitution was first drafted, some argued it didn't explicitly protect individual liberties. This led to a demand for a Bill of Rights, and the very first one, ratified in 1791, was designed to safeguard these essential freedoms from government interference. Freedom of religion. This isn't just about the right to worship as you please. It has 2 parts: the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. The Establishment Clause prevents the government from establishing or endorsing a religion, ensuring a separation of church and state. The Free Exercise Clause protects an individual's right to practice their religion, or no religion at all, without government coercion. Think about the debates over prayer in schools or religious symbols on public land. These all stem from this fundamental clause. Freedom of speech. This is arguably the most well-known and often tested freedom. It protects our right to express ourselves, our opinions, and our ideas, even if those ideas are unpopular or controversial. This isn't absolute, of course. There are limitations, which we'll touch on later, like incitement to violence or defamation. But at its core, it ensures a marketplace of ideas where citizens can openly debate and critique. Freedom of the press. This protects the ability of journalists and media outlets to gather and disseminate information without fear of government censorship or reprisal. In a democratic society, an independent press acts as a vital watchdog, holding those in power accountable. Think of investigative journalism and its role in uncovering truths. That's the press in action, protected by this amendment. Right to peaceably assemble. This allows individuals to gather together for common purposes, whether it's a political protest, a rally, or even a social gathering. It's about collective action and the power of people coming together to advocate for change. This is why you see demonstrations and marches happening regularly. They are exercises of this right. Right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. This ensures that citizens can directly appeal to the government to address problems, suggest policy changes, or voice concerns without fear of punishment. It's about maintaining a direct line of communication between the governed and the government, from writing letters to elected officials to formal legal petitions. These 5 freedoms, interwoven, create a robust framework for self-governing people. The First Amendment, while seemingly straightforward, has been the subject of countless legal battles and evolving interpretations over the centuries. The Supreme Court, in particular, has played a pivotal role in defining the scope and limits of these freedoms. Let's look at a few landmark cases that have shaped our understanding. Schenck versus United States, 1919. This case introduced the clear and present danger test. Charles Schenck was distributing leaflets urging resistance to the World War I draft. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes famously stated that free speech doesn't protect a person falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic. This establishes that speech can be restricted if it poses an immediate and serious threat. Tinker versus Des Moines Independent Community School District, 1969. This case affirmed students' First Amendment rights in schools. Students wore black armbands to protest the Vietnam War and were suspended. The Supreme Court ruled that students do not shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate as long as their expression doesn't substantially disrupt the educational environment. This is why students can, within reason, express their political views at school. This was a New York Times Company versus Sullivan, 1964, a landmark case for freedom of the press and libel law. It established a higher standard for public officials to prove defamation, requiring actual malice, meaning the false statement was made with knowledge of its falsity or with reckless disregard of whether it was false or not. This makes it harder for public figures to suppress critical reporting and protects robust journalistic inquiry. Texas versus Johnson, 1989, this highly controversial case affirmed that flag burning is a form of protected speech. Gregory Johnson burned an American flag in protest of Reagan administration policies. The Supreme Court ruled that even offensive or disagreeable speech is protected under the First Amendment, highlighting that symbolic acts can convey powerful messages and are thus protected. These cases, and many others, demonstrate the continuous balancing act the courts perform, protecting individual liberties while also ensuring public order and safety. The interpretation of the First Amendment is not static. It evolves with societal changes and new challenges. Fast forward to today, and the First Amendment faces new and complex challenges in the digital age. The internet, social media platforms, and artificial intelligence have fundamentally altered how we communicate, consume information, and engage with the world. Consider these contemporary issues: social media and censorship. While the First Amendment protects us from government censorship, it doesn't strictly apply to private companies like Facebook, X, or TikTok. These platforms have their terms of service and can moderate content. This has led to intense debates about who controls the flow of information, the role of these platforms in public discourse, and whether they should be treated more like public forums. Should these private companies be held to the same free speech standards as the government? That's a question many are grappling with. Misinformation and disinformation, the speed and reach of online communication mean that false or misleading information can spread rapidly, often with significant real-world consequences. While the First Amendment protects even false speech unless it falls into categories like defamation or incitement, the sheer volume and sophisticated nature of misinformation pose a challenge to informed public discourse. Hate speech versus free speech. Where do we draw the line between protected, albeit offensive, speech and speech that incites violence or harassment? This is a constant and difficult balancing act. While offensive speech is generally protected, threats and incitement to violence are not. The debates around cancel culture and deplatforming often revolve around these very distinctions. Privacy and surveillance. The digital age also raises questions about privacy and government surveillance. How do our First Amendment rights intersect with the government's ability to monitor online activity, and what safeguards are in place to prevent abuses of power? These are not easy questions, and there are no simple answers. The First Amendment, designed in a different era, must now be applied to a technological landscape that its framers could never have imagined. It requires ongoing vigilance and thoughtful discussion to ensure its principles remain relevant and protective of our freedoms. As we wrap up our exploration of the First Amendment, I hope you've gained a deeper appreciation for its profound significance. It's more than just a legal document, it's a testament to the belief that an informed, engaged, and free citizenry is the bedrock of a healthy democracy. Think about it. Without the freedom to express dissenting views, how would injustices be brought to light? Without the freedom of the press, who would hold power accountable? Without the freedom to assemble, how would communities advocate for change? And without the freedom of conscience, how could we truly be individuals? The First Amendment empowers us to be active participants in our society. It gives us the tools to challenge, to question, to innovate, and to contribute to the ongoing American experiment. But with these immense freedoms come responsibilities. The responsibility is to engage respectfully, even with those we disagree with. The responsibility is to seek truth and distinguish it from falsehood. And the responsibility to defend these rights not just for ourselves but for all. The First Amendment is a constant work in progress, constantly tested, constantly debated. Its strength lies in our willingness to understand it, to uphold it, and to apply its principles in an ever-changing world. It is truly your freedom's foundation. As we close out another episode of Literal BS, let's pause to consider something that's frequently mentioned, occasionally contested, but perpetually essential: our freedoms as American citizens. In an era that seems more complicated by the day, where the boundary between protection and interference can become hazy, and where the endless stream of data can overshadow basic principles, it's simple to overlook the authority we possess. Our freedoms aren't merely theoretical ideas argued in legal chambers or written in aging constitutional texts. They form the cornerstone of our liberty. They grant us the ability to challenge those in power without intimidation, to gather and insist on transparency, to scrutinize leadership, and to ensure our perspectives reach the centers of decision-making. They serve as our defense against unchecked authority and the groundwork for our quest toward a more fulfilling existence. This is Rob signing off. See you next time.